Hi, would you like to give us a brief introduction about yourself and your background and your work, your current job?
Yes, yeah. Hi. Thanks for, having me and inviting me to talk. Happy to be here. My name is Nico. Well, my full name is Nikolas Katigbak. Everyone calls me Nico. Um, I grew up in the Philippines. I went to IVC for 2 years. I transferred to Berkeley for a degree in industrial engineering and operations research in what feels like forever ago. But now I'm at AWS and living in Seattle with my wife and our dog.
Awesome. Um, so let me move to next. So which schools did you apply and like what were the results? And also what was your transfer GPA?
Yeah. So I remember I applied to, so because my major was rather obscure, like it's not as popular as like a lot of the other engineering disciplines, there were only a handful of schools that offered it. So I applied to UC Berkeley and Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and Pomona. And I believe at the time my transfer GPA was somewhere around 3.8, 3.9, I think. And um, I think I got accepted to most of the schools I applied to, and but going to Berkeley was an easy choice for me.
Um, so I noticed that like you moved from the Philippines. So like, what are some of the challenges you face starting college here and like at university, and how you overcame?
Great question. So being half the battle of being new in a new country is like getting used to the life that you left behind back home, and I think that's just natural, and that just is something that takes time. I think what really helped was building a community around myself here in my new home, meeting as many people as I can, and really getting involved, like getting a plan in place, like set your sights on something and get going. That's the best advice I could give.
Okay, thanks.
And be open-minded.
Yeah, definitely that also. So yeah, I also you talked about getting like a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering. So how did you make that transition to software engineering, like your current work at AWS? And then like, what are some of the challenges you faced and yeah, how you overcame?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So the expected answers here are probably going to be like researching online. There's so much free resources available online, and I did take advantage of those. Like I took classes in Udemy and Udacity. Um, I read books. I highly recommend, I still recommend and sometimes pick up various copies of like O'Reilly books and Head First books, because I feel like they do a really good job of providing that top level cursory view. And that pretty much equipped me with enough to start working on projects and be able to find a role doing like as a junior engineer and helping out with a software project. And from there, it's really just keep on going, keep on learning. And um, there was a big shift, I think. After a while, I was ready to make a big shift and dive deeper into computer science fundamentals and really understand um, data structures, algorithms, and operating systems, the classic computer science stuff. And that helped me tremendously.
What are some of the extracurriculars you participated in at IBC and like what activities would you recommend doing that would help them become a very competitive candidate for transfer admission or just better prepare for future career?
Got it. Okay, so two parts. I guess the first part is some extracurriculars, and then the second part is how to prepare and stand out. So I'd say for extracurriculars, I was on the tennis team. So tennis was a hobby that I picked up as a teenager in Manila, and it's something that stayed with me. And I guess that's something that also helped, going back to a prior question you asked, that's something that helped me transition, keep that part of me, my part of my day-to-day life, the same, even though I'm in a new place. And unfortunately, I can't say that I joined any clubs specific to career building at the time, because again, at the time, my major was industrial engineering and operations research, and back then, I don't think there were any, clubs focused on that. I'd be surprised if there are any now. But if, like yourself, someone's interested in computer science, I'd suggest look for clubs that are working on something, or science project, I mean, a software project, a robotics project, or even going to like local meetups is a great idea.
What are some of the resources you took advantage of while you were in college?
So I'd say I made a lot of use of the library. That's a great resource. I think I remember there was also a study center that had like a, you know, some tutors, I think. Yeah, or some tutors that would help you with your problem sets and kind of just working through the more difficult material. Um, Office hours, I think spending time with your professors and um, connecting with them and kind of talking with them, you kind of learn a lot. You learn a lot more than what you came there to ask them about. And I guess another resource is, I mean, IBC is so close to UCI as well. And so at the time, I remember through friends of friends, like I would eventually meet some UCI students and kind of get to study at their library and kind of just hang out and get a taste of university campus life.
Awesome. And then also, like I wanted to ask a question, like, when did your interest on software engineering spark? Like, you were like majoring in industrial engineering, so like, was it in IVC or like it's like at UC Berkeley?
I think, oddly enough, I was always into computers. I'd always been pretty handy around computers, but never quite formally programming. Like
Mhm.
I was always on the GUI, never working on the CLI, and it wasn't until, and so that was forever, like since high school, and it wasn't until university that I actually took a formal programming language and kind of understood how computers worked under the hood.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and that kind of was just like, you know, made me like super interested in it.
awesome. Who were the professor you connected the most with at IVC and would recommend to other students, and how you were able to connect with them and how did they help you?
Yes. So I remember connecting a lot with Professor Sanjay Gupta, I think,
Mm. Yeah.
and that was, I always enjoyed being in his classes, and um, interacting with him was always fun. And like I said, like you always learn a lot.
Mhm.
I think one of the things he shared with me when I went to office hours that was also shared with him, as he told me, right? He said that when he also went to office hours before, like he said, half the work is understanding the problem. Like don't come into office hours just pointing at a line on the textbook. um, I'd like you to understand the problem and come here and talk to me about it, showing some level of understanding. And that's something that I've taken with me even like in my professional career. That's been really useful.
Yeah, that's true. What skills like college students should be developing to improve like future career aspects and like tips for college students to stand out on job application for like software engineering?
Yeah, great question. I think working on projects and getting experience is, there's a lot of things, and there's a lot of things, there's nothing really new that I can say. I think what I want to do here is just emphasize that what's really going to come through when you're interacting with those in industry like recruiters or hiring managers or even other engineers is the depth of your experience and how you understand things. And so the best way to get that is through working on things, and also keep an eye out that it's not just about hard skills like programming skills and software skills, but also professional skills like how you manage your time and how you communicate. um, all contribute to that equation of what's going to come through when you're speaking with um, someone who's evaluating you as a job candidate.
Awesome. Yeah, that's true. I would like to ask about like your like how you tips for passing like technical interviews, like and like what I mean like what you had to like go through for the technical interview entering AWS.
Yeah, of course. So again, like there's a lot of resources available on this. It's a great question, but I just want to emphasize that it's it's practice. I think um, there's nothing to it but to do it. Um, but even doing all that practice and understanding it isn't enough yet. But it is something that's necessary. And so I would say um, prepare as early as you can. You know, like even now, start preparing and being familiar with data structures and algorithms, being comfortable with them, and um, work on solving them fast. And also work on being able to reason through your thinking and why you're doing things that way. Um, and I guess one last tip I have is to kind of be methodical about it. Like when you're solving a problem, kind of have a structure to how you're going to tackle it so that whatever, because you don't know what they're going to ask. So whatever comes through the door, you have a structure that you can rely on of how you're going to, you know, go into the problem and figure things out and make sure that you keep moving through it.
Thank you. So what tips do you have for like community college students who are looking for internships and like how can they differentiate themselves among like university students for internship?
That's a great question. And I think showing some anything that shows initiative is always going to stand out. So what I mean by that is working on projects, having like a portfolio that could be hosted, like it's online and people
Oh,
can look at it. Like have a GitHub account that's active, and when you talk to recruiters or even hiring managers, it's that much more convincing to say like, "Oh yeah, I worked on this Raspberry Pi thing. Here's a link to my GitHub project on that," rather than to just say, "I worked on a Raspberry Pi project."
mhm.
So that might be a good thing to do. Um, and something that comes to mind just now is I don't know, like work with your professors, like whoever your computer science professors are, maybe connect with them and ask them for, you know, what's challenging work, what's their perspective on the industry, like what are some projects, because a lot of times these big software projects, they don't start from scratch. Like at their core is another software project. The same way that whenever someone builds a website, they use something like React, like you and I talked about earlier. A lot of the times, a lot of these applications have these open source or at least very publicly available core services that you can like start learning and working with now. And that would really stand out if you can talk about or list that on your resume.
Awesome. Yeah, that's true. What are some of your personal favorite or like favorite like CS learning platforms online? Like what helped you out the most? Like you would like to recommend to a student?
Um, I think I think they're all largely the same, but common ones like LeetCode or um, Daily Coding Problem is something I signed up for that would just send you interview questions in your inbox. Or excuse me, or um, Pramp. Pramp is also a really good resource because it allows you, it pairs you with other candidates who are practicing, and so you get to get you both get to help each other practice, and it's free. Um, and yeah, so I think those are my go-tos, and like you can find lots of others that are pretty similar.
Awesome. Wait, so do you actually like still go on the code and stuff like right now, like after you, I mean, you already got a job, but you're still doing those problems?
Yeah, I think so. You know, software engineering and your career, it's like this dynamically evolving thing. Like you always want to be prepared and you want to stay sharp because um, it's not day to day that I'm working with binary trees. It really isn't. Like in your day to day, you're working with regular objects and you're passing strings around, and you're not trying to look for intersections or trying to count things efficiently. And so it's very easy for those types of skills and familiarity to kind of fade
Yeah.
and yeah, and kind of become dull. And so it's always a good idea to stay sharp.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's a really great idea. Good tip. Um, yeah, so um, what advice would you give yourself at the beginning of the transfer process, and what are some of the insights you gained while applying to for transfer that you would like to pass on other students?
Gotcha. I don't know if I have any unique perspectives on the transfer process because it's kind of like a black box, right? Like you have a bunch of requirements that you have to fulfill by a certain date, and then you submit and you kind of just wait. Um, but I guess um, yeah, start early. Like don't wait till the last minute. Start early and start thinking about it as soon as you can, and kind of backtrack. Maybe when it comes when thinking specifically about, okay, what am I going to say in my personal statement? How am I going to structure it? Really, at least what works for me is starting early enough that you have some time to let ideas kind of just bounce around in your mind, and you might even be looking at this early enough that you can create the bullet points or the main points that you're going to talk about, right? Like when you see the prompt and you say, I think my experience might be a little thin or shallow on this point. Maybe that's what I should focus my next 2 to 3 months trying to explore.
Awesome. Yeah, so based on your experience, like what do you admission officer looks for the most in an applicant, and like how could the applicant like compensate for it if they have like low GPA?
Gotcha. Um, Again, this is not firsthand knowledge. This is kind
Mhm.
of just stuff I've heard as well. But you know, admissions officers want to not just admit students, but they also think about building the student body. And so I would imagine that they are concerned about diversity and admitting students that would have unique contributions and perspectives to the student body. And so anything that you can show that is like uniquely you would be helpful. I know that's not terribly useful, but like whatever hobbies or interests that you have, like pursue them. Pursue them to the point that you can produce an artifact, meaning you can produce like a website, a song, a trophy, a medal, like like something to show for it. I would say, as far as hobbies are concerned, and as far as having a low GPA, it's like I would say try to think of it like, look, you are in control of your professional narrative, and maybe your GPA says one thing, but what else what else is in the story? What else is that bigger arc that you're trying to tell that, hey, maybe I had a low GPA, but that's because I was devoting my time and energy on this instead, and here's what I have to show for it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good point. Um, yeah, so while writing personal insight questions, like what are the strategies that you use and like did you write like a story like narrative from moving Philippines to here or like did you talk about your hobbies like tennis or are they I noticed that you got like several awards on IVC like on LinkedIn for I don't know
Oh
like
yeah.
yeah, so like did you write about that or
So not so much about the awards that I had received. I did not necessarily write about those. I tried to I think I did a little bit of both of what you said. Meaning when you said like A, did I use a narrative approach or B, did I focus on a project or a specific experience that I worked on, if I'm remembering that correctly? I think I did both because typically there's one or two prompts. And so there's space for you to kind of move things around and use certain stories that you have in certain places. And so I think narrative based is always good. I always prefer that, although sometimes it's harder. I think make sure that you're writing in a three-part theme, as you would probably learn in your writing classes, meaning have a crisp, concrete thesis statement and then follow it up with concrete examples as well. So definitely show, don't tell. Um, yeah, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. And also, it's probably one good approach that would also help is before you even, put your cursor on the document to write these personal statements, spend some time just free writing, meaning just you and some random notepad and just get your thoughts and experiences out of your mind and then you can just organize them. That way it makes it easier to organize in my experience.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. I hope not. So yeah, if you could go back to college or like UC Berkeley, what are some of the things that you wish you did differently that could have helped you out more in the future career path?
Got it. Um, I think if I could have been, and I think you guys might have already solved this, but if I could have been a bit more aware and intentional of my career, I think that's something I would have, if I could go back in time and talk to Nico, I would have probably let him know that, hey, kind of start thinking about your career a little bit sooner, have a plan in place rather than just focusing on the current experience of going to school and thinking that after school the job comes next somewhat naturally. Um, you can pretty easily tell that that's not really the case.
Yeah, that's true. So I noticed like on your LinkedIn profile, like you started working like pretty early, b- like at while you were back in the Philippines as an engineering assistant, and then like you got here and become the student design advisor, and then like how did you like get those positions at like as a college student?
I think those were both, well, the um, engineering assistant position was through personal networks. It so happened that a family friend knew of an engineering firm that needed some help, like some junior level help. Um, and so they put me in touch with, it was really small, so they put me in touch with the owner. And so we just talked and he just wanted to understand a bit of like where I'm coming from and what my interests are. And so I think so anyway, my advice is for that is don't underestimate your own personal networks. Be vocal, be forward about your intentions and what you're looking for. Like people appreciate that. Like let them know that you're looking for opportunities and you're looking for work, internships. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, you mentioned a bit about professional skills, like soft skills. So like, would you like to talk about some of the tips that you would like to share or like advice to develop these?
Yes, of course. So when it comes to professional skills, like I think the overall theme, like there's a lot, right? But if
Mhm.
I could summarize, it's like there is a real shift from that I think it would be good for you to prepare yourself for. There's a big shift from because in school we get a big set of requirements and a due date, and we kind of can are free to somewhat just disappear into a hole and do the work and just come out the other side delivering it. But I think in the workplace, it's very different, and they kind of expect that new entry level, coworkers will work that way. But the sooner that you're able to not work that way and kind of adjust to how in a business or in real life, it's like requirements are always constantly shifting. And that means that you have to be proactive and you have to be seeking feedback and sharing your work with others so that they know what you're doing. Like the more you can get used to that and all those supporting skills to do that would be great. Supporting skills to do that would be like communication skills, note taking skills. I can't tell you how many times people recommended that you need to take notes. Like when I was starting out my career, only for me to be like, yeah, of course, I always take notes in class. Okay.
Mhm.
But as I've progressed in my career, it's like it naturally came as a necessary skill that I needed to be really good at taking notes and indexing information as I learned more.
Yeah. So would you like to talk about some of the like organizations that you were part of and like clubs activities that you did at like UC Berkeley?
Yeah. So at UC Berkeley, I for the first year, I joined the tennis club. It wasn't the varsity tennis team; it was like a club. So it's a bunch of just tennis enthusiast students. Again, just kind of again, it's a new place, and I needed something to stay familiar with.
Yep.
And then I also joined a professional engineering fraternity, and I think that's actually a really good idea, and I would recommend that, especially for transfer students. Maybe not necessarily a fraternity, but I think so. The situation that I observed was when you join, a large proportion of the student body have been there since freshman year. And so they've already kind of built these circles and these networks. And then when you join as a transfer, you're kind of like new, right? So it kind of helps to join these orgs and kind of um, yeah, get acquainted with as many people as you can, and of course stay in touch with your fellow transferees. UC Berkeley did a good job of creating creating that transfer community, meaning there were events wherein it's just all transfers so that we can all meet each other and stay in touch. So
Yeah, I mean that's a thing. Like, were there some instances you felt like you didn't there's like a barrier between like being a transfer student and like people who were there like since like 4 years.
um like in the professional workplace or like in at the university.
University.
At the university, maybe maybe there's like a faint, whiff that I would pick up of like, oh, you're a transfer or something like but luckily for me, it wasn't so prevalent that it ever became an issue. But if it ever became an issue for you, like, or for anyone rather, like, don't let it bother you. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. So,
Okay. Yeah, so would you like to share, I mean, if it's not confidential, like what do you do at AWS and then like yeah, just about your current job.
oh yeah, yeah, it's not confidential. So at AWS, I work on this product called AWS Shield. So it's essentially a web application filter, and so it's um, DDoS protection and web application protection at the layer 7, so at the HTTP or at the request level. And so day to day, it's writing um, code to fix bugs and implement features or even build new services. Um, and the code that we write is mostly in Java or Python. And then the other parts of my time are spent interviewing candidates, writing design docs. So that's something that we do here at AWS that I really like is before we, if the feature or the change is big enough, before we jump in and write code, we like to write a design document. So it's in English with lines and arrows and graphs to kind of sharpen our thoughts and sharpen our idea and really communicate with everyone on the team. Like, here's what we want to do and why and how we want to do it. And then after getting buy-in there, we go ahead and write it. So yeah, we write docs, interview, write code, things like that.
Awesome, awesome. That sounds so cool. So what are some of the insights that you gain over time in the industry, and like anything else you would like to share to people who just started, like tips or advice?
Um, yeah, I'd say for being successful in the industry, it's being. I think I think at this stage, like you're already doing a good job building your hard skills, right? Like you're learning code, you're working on projects, you're looking for internships. We've touched on all that. Maybe something that we haven't talked about yet, right? Something I just want to emphasize a bit more is um, organizational skills. Like investing in those will really pay off. Meaning, learning how to organize your own work, meaning manage your tasks, manage your time, um, but then also working within an organization, like how to communicate and um, present and and negotiate. Like negotiating is kind of a big topic that you don't have to be Shark Tank or anything super good. So you don't have to be super good at negotiating, but I think it would be useful to have just the basics. Um, so yeah.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. So like as for having a degree in industrial engineering, like were there like challenges that you faced while applying for jobs for software engineering?
Yes, there definitely were. I think it's it's because it's such a competitive field,
Yeah.
and my background was so non-traditional.
Mhm.
So I think just being able to have patience and open-mindedness and being willing to entertain and talk to lots of different companies and learn as much as you can, whatever you need to learn, whatever you need to work on to, as rapidly as you can build your skill set. Um, is always a good thing. Like it can't hurt because I, I really did feel like I was playing catch up a lot of times, and I think that's just par for the course, right?
Yeah.
So just kind of keep going through it, keep grinding through it is the advice I give because you know what is it like? Success is just hard work and luck at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Any tips regarding resume and like yeah, job interviews?
Yeah. So for your resume, like I think especially early on in your career, keep it to one page. There's really no need to make it, super long.
Mhm.
Um, like even if you had 2 pages, it's pretty obvious that like if you only have 2 years of experience, what's going to be in there?
Mm.
Uh, but pay attention to organizing it and making it readable.
Mhm.
Make it stand out a bit. Use a serif font so that it's more readable.
Mhm.
Yeah, pay attention to formatting, like play around with the line spaces so that um, visually it's as easy to read as possible. Use action words and bullet points. Use numbers. Again, this kind of goes back to the show, don't tell. Like emphasize what you did and what the impact was.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, on the final note, like any other topics that we haven't touched upon that you would like to share?
Um, no, I think we covered everything. Uh, I think this was a really good, you know, set of questions that you prepared. Maybe one other thing I would add is maybe it's not so much just in school and being a professional, but kind of step one is school, step two is work, and then step three afterwards. One thing that's always good to prepare for is like learning a bit about personal finance,
Yeah.
kind of physical health and well-being, like exercise or any physical activity, and also just paying attention to like how you manage your kind of mental happiness and mental state are things that will just pay off in the long run.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely. Do you still play tennis?
I don't, but I guess it did, at least just being physically active did set me up for being able to approach physical activity. And so I'm happy for that. But I haven't been playing tennis. It's too rainy and cold here in Seattle.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I'll stop the recording.
Okay.